Good afternoon, Alistair Trent here, and it is the 15th of February, 2022, and we've obviously got some quite interesting developments in Canada with respect to the government in enacting or implementing the Emergencies Act to deal with the ongoing trucker protests and other demonstrations that are occurring at the border. And of course, when I heard this, I immediately started looking into the Emergencies Act, just because it see what was going on and exactly how the government purports to derive these exceptional authorities. And in my, having done so, in my respectful submission, it's fairly obvious that the government does not have the authority that it's purporting to have under the provisions of these acts. Although I'll certainly go through the acts and allow people to decide for themselves. So the Emergencies Act itself, as it's currently written, has a preamble which seems to indicate that it's basically directed at ensuring the safety and security of the individual, the protection of the values of the body politic, and the preservation of the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of the state, which it recognizes as fundamental obligations of government. A national emergency, which is a fundamental decision that's echoed throughout the legislation, in the sense that any implementation of the act requires a national emergency in order to bring into play the act. And for the purpose of this act, a national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and is of such proportion or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. And I would point out about the paragraph A that it requires an endangerment to life, health, or safety of Canadians. It does not attach to economic interests such as the movement of traffic or running a factory or the provision of materials, or in fact any type of economic interest. It's solely directed at life, health, and safety of the populace. Or in the alternative, it can also seriously threaten the ability of the government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada. Which I take it would be from either a foreign invasion or something of that nature. And it also requires that in either case, it cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. So in my view, nothing that's going on right now is sufficient to justify it or fall within the definition of a national emergency, because the lives, health, and safety of Canadians is not being threatened by either the trucker protests or the border shutdowns. I mean, no doubt, and indeed, if you listen to the government's reasoning for implementing the act, it's the economic interests that are being specified to be the motivation and the justification for implementing this act, and the act simply doesn't deal with that type of a threat. It's directed solely at the lives, health, and safety of Canadians in terms of qualifying as a national emergency. Now, the Act goes on to specify several types of emergencies, and the first, which I heard on the news, is what's being dealt with here as a public welfare emergency. And in my view, again, this doesn't apply whatsoever. The public welfare emergency is defined as meaning an emergency that is caused by a real or imminent fire, flood, drought, storm, earthquake, or other natural phenomenon. B, a disease in human beings, animals, or plants. Or C, accident or pollution. And I note that it has to be that it caused, like the emergency has to be caused by these things. Like it would be in the case of disease, for example, if one were to take it that it's COVID, it would have to be caused by the COVID itself. It wouldn't be caused by a public reaction to the COVID or a public protest dealing with the government's implementation of rules relating to COVID. The emergency has to be directly caused by the disease itself. and it further has to result or may result in danger to life, property, social disruption, or a breakdown in the flow of essential goods, services, or resources so serious as to be a national emergency. So again, even if all of that were met, it still has to qualify as a national emergency, which is the definition we just dealt with, indicating that to endanger the life, safety, etc., and not merely economic interests. So this, in my view, fails on any number of levels. First of all, because the emergency isn't caused directly by the disease. Rather, it's an objection to the public measures taken in response to the disease. And moreover, it doesn't result in a national emergency because it's only attaching economic interests and not any threat to life safety of Canadians in the sense of what's required by, I think it was Section 2 of the Act. More importantly, or what I think is more at issue or appropriate, is the public order emergency, which seems to be more applicable to what the government is trying to attack here. And a public order emergency means an emergency that arises from threats to the security of Canada and that is so serious as to be a national emergency. So again, national emergency, not economic interests, life and safety of Canadians, etc. And again, this has to arise from threats to the security of Canada. And threats to the security of Canada has the same meaning as assigned by Section 2 of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act. So let's take a look at the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act and see what that has to say in terms of defining what a threat to the national security or threat to the security of Canada might be. So again, Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act, Section 2, threats to the security of Canada means espionage or sabotage that it is against Canada or is detrimental to the interests of Canada or activities directed towards or in support of such espionage or sabotage. B, foreign influenced clearly A doesn't apply. B, foreign influenced activities within or relating to Canada that are detrimental to the interests of Canada and are clandestine or deceptive or involve a threat to any person. Well, again, this isn't foreign influence, it's Canadians objecting to the activities of their own government, so that doesn't apply. C, activities within or relating to Canada directed towards or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence against persons or properties for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada or a foreign state. And in my respectful submission, that clearly doesn't apply. There's no violence going on whatsoever. In fact, if anything, it's been an entirely peaceful protest and has turned into more of a street party than anything else, although it may very well engage a lot of or entail a lot of inconvenience to people who live in the area, whatever. There certainly can't be argued that there's any degree of serious violence involved. Or D, activities directed toward or to undermining by covert unlawful acts or directed towards or intended ultimately to lead to the destruction or overthrow by violence of the constitutionally established system of government in Canada. So once again, there's absolutely no inclination that anybody is trying to bring about the violent overthrow of the government. Merely people are getting together and having what amounts to an extremely loud and boisterous, in some cases, street party with the intent of disrupting commercial activities and objecting to the steps taken to the government. Moreover, in relation to any of this, there's another specific exclusion to suggest that it does not include lawful advocacy, protest, or dissent unless carried on in conjunction with any of the activities referred to in paragraphs A to D, which are the espionage, foreign influence, violence, and violent overthrow of the government. So there's a specific exclusion for lawful advocacy, protest, or dissent, like political dissent, unless it entails one of these other things. And in any case, it doesn't entail any of these other things. And in either case, if you go back to the Emergencies Act, either one of these, public order emergency or the public welfare emergency, requires that it be a national emergency, which again doesn't entail the disruption of commercial activities or such, but rather only things that endanger the safety and health and well-being of Canadians. And I know when, you know, the previous occasion during the October crisis, when the predecessor to this act was implemented, it was when there was an actual explosions and bombs being set and all of this type of thing, which, needless to say, would be sufficient to trigger this. But the holding of a loud and boisterous party that has the potential to disrupt commercial activities in no way falls within this act, in my respectful submission. And as such, the government is not justified in implementing this act in any way. And to do so, in my respectful submission, is unlawful in itself. And so for those reasons, I do not believe that the current actions taken by the government are legally authorized. You know, certainly we're a nation of laws, but adherence to the law is adherence to the law as written, not adherence to any particular government body. And in my view, the existing government has far exceeded the legal authority given to it pursuant to this act. So those are my respectful submissions on the issue, and I thank you for tuning in, and please share this with anybody if you find it interesting. Thanks very much. Take care.